Everything we do is going to be about winning. Okay, we're going to learn to do things the right way, and that's the only way we're going to do them. Because if it doesn't help us, we're not doing it, man. That's just as simple as it gets. Win the Super Bowl.
That's
I
good.
mean it too. You know, one of the things that the only reason you become a head coach in this league, in my opinion, is to win. That's it. That's the bottom line. If you do it for any other reason, you're wrong.
Hey, football fans, welcome to the Washington Command Center. So, today I'm going to break down the NFC East's offseason, what each team lost, what they gained, and how we stack up to begin this new era of Washington football, an era where this proud franchise can once again command respect. And what better way to kick off this new era than subscribing here to the first, the real, but now apparently not the only Washington Command Center. So you can find your way back to some of the most opinionated and ice cold calculated takes on all things Washington Commanders. And while you're at it, ring that bell, hit that like button. It's free to do and it means a lot. So, the other day, I caught the end of a live stream with DMV Sports Zone and Juan Gotti Talking Sports where they power ranked the division. And boys, I did not like what I heard. Not just because I'm an ultra fanboy, but because I think top to bottom, with the moves we've made, we just did the most improvement at the areas that cause real power shifts in a division. While our rivals either took major hits or just didn't attack the biggest areas of concern. But I'm going to comb over the rosters and take a closer look, starting here with last year's NFC East champs, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, in free agency or through trades, Dallas lost 5 proven high caliber starters. They lost wide receiver 1 Amari Cooper. They lost a Pro Bowl right tackle in La'el Collins, the team's best pure edge defender, Randy Gregory, a starting guard in Connor Williams, and Cedric Benson, who was the third or fourth receiving option in that offense. They also lost Keanu Neal, that they signed and transitioned to play a similar role that we had Landon in as like a hybrid safety linebacker. So that's the kind of deficit they had to overcome this offseason to replace those guys just to get back to where they were last year, not to take a step forward. Now, did they do that with their additions in free agency? Well, they picked up James Washington, who might be a solid replacement for Cedric Benson, and they picked up Dante Fowler Jr., who, in my opinion, is nowhere near a replacement for Randy Gregory. But let's look at the draft. Now, it's a massive long shot for any draft picks to come right in and offer a similar level of production of Amari Cooper, La'el Collins, or, Randy Gregory. But they brought in Tyler Smith in the first round, who's extremely raw and I think projects better as a guard, who could probably give them something close to Connor Williams, like right out. Even with his rawness, because of his physical gifts, he could probably give them similar production. But if they mean to plug him into Collins' spot at offensive tackle, it could be a couple seasons, if ever, before they say anything close to La'el type play. Now, they also drafted Matt Waletzko, who's a physically gifted offensive tackle. If they mean for him to step right in, That's a massive leap in competition from where he played, the small school he played for, and I, I I doubt that they get anything close from him. Then wide receiver Jalen Tolbert, who's a solid physical big play wide receiver. They bring him in as very much a direct shot to try to replace Amari with a close physical approximation. Now, I'm not saying he's a similar player, but they measure very much the same. And this is another guy that just beat up on lesser competition. He's from a small school and he wasn't playing the top tier competition. So he's going to be taking a huge level up and trying to replace the production of Amari Cooper, who was one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. So I just think it's going to be hard for them to replace any of that with what they've brought in. They also drafted Sam Williams, who I think is more of a high motor, athletic outside linebacker type than a defensive end. And I thought he would do better for a team that was looking to use him as an outside linebacker in a 3-4 defense that was willing to drop him into coverage too, because I think he could shine there. But he's a long way off from the type of player that Randy Gregory was. So, I mean, there is the idea of Micah moving to edge rusher full time, which could be good, but that weakens him a little bit at linebacker then. I really don't see any way that Dallas is as good a team this year as they were last year. And last year, they, weren't good enough to get anywhere, outside of the playoffs. Now, people make the argument that Dak is the clear best quarterback in the division, but look at the team Dak had around him, or that he had to have around him before he got those MVP talks. And even with that team he had around him, he was still very hot and cold as the season went on. And he still didn't finish in the top 3 of the MVP talks, like our boy Carson Wentz did. And Carson Wentz did that even after missing the last 3 games of the season and never having that kind of supporting cast around him that Dak had last year. Well, now Dak lost a huge amount of that perfect situation that had finally elevated him to the level that people like to credit him with. And Wentz has stepped into the best situation of his career. Now, I said that just to emphasize that Dallas might not have the top quarterback in the division now, after losing a lot of the support structure that propped them up. But we'll talk about the possible best quarterback in the division later. I really just want to emphasize the major losses Dallas has taken and what it could mean to the success of their most important player, Dak Prescott. Major blows to his protection, major blows to a receiving core, and then also defensively on the team, major blows to the defense, losing Randy Gregory. Now, Micah will no doubt take a step forward, if that's even possible with how good he was last year. But he's just one defensive player. A healthy Jabril Cox and Leighton Vander Esch could help out, but they didn't do anything to help out Trevon Diggs, who is honestly a liability when he's not being gifted interceptions. If he's not picking off the ball, he's giving up massive yards. And they didn't do anything to fix that. So I think Dallas's offseason losses are going to drop them down the divisional power rankings. And we're just going to have to see how far they drop. But I don't think it's looking good for them at all. Now on to Philly, the team Washington fans are viewing as having this massive, great offseason. But honestly, the biggest move they've made are to refresh their strengths and keep them, the way they are, which is really smart. But it isn't causing a massive step forward. They're also very lucky that they didn't lose any real impact players. They're going to have a strong rotation with their defensive interior, but their biggest addition in the draft, Jordan Davis, is more the heir apparent to Fletcher Cox, who's back, on a 1 year deal at age 31. So it's just going to be a rotation. They're basically just making sure they keep that level of talent, but they're not really gaining much. They're just staying the same as they swap in Jordan Davis for Fletcher Cox. If Jordan Davis can be Fletcher Cox. And that's a big if, because Fletcher Cox was an amazing player. Brandon Graham is entering the last year on his contract at 34, and he's coming off an Achilles tear. They don't have anybody close to replacing him if he's not back to form. Not even free agent signing Hassan Riddick, who, with his inflated sack numbers, is still no Brandon Graham. But like I said, at his age of 34, it's going to be a long shot to see Graham return to form. Outside of their D line, the rest of their defense is just kind of pedestrian. A bunch of developmental lottery tickets around an aging Darius Slay and Anthony Harris in the secondary, and a weak linebacker group that I don't think is improved much by Nakobe Dean, that I didn't see as someone who was going to translate to the NFL. And that was before all the injuries surfaced. Now he's a 5'11", 225-pound linebacker that is coming into the NFL nursing a pec injury, a bum shoulder, a meniscus tear, and an ankle injury. And that's before he ever steps onto an NFL field. Even if he ever does make a noticeable impact on their defense, it's not happening this year, I don't think. Offensively, they did a lot of the same. They did a great job replenishing their O-line. Cam Jurgens or Landon Dickerson they got last year could play heir to Jason Kelsey. Mailata has left tackle on lock for years to come. They also have some other solid guards. And they also have a couple guys that might be able to fill in for Lane Johnson, who's probably going to be hanging things up here in the near future. They got a solid group of running backs that give them a good run game behind that offensive line. And now, with the addition of A.J. Brown, they have a nice wide receiver duo between him and Devontae Smith. To go along with Dallas Goedert at tight end, they got a nice little receiving core there. But they still have Jalen Hurts at quarterback. He just isn't a good enough passer to take advantage of what they have there. It's like they went out and got a special explosive round to go along with this high-speed, long-range, armor-piercing round they got last year, but they still don't have a rifle chambered for them. So they're basically paperweights. I just don't see the moves they've made, no matter how big the names, as massive improvements. Just fortifications to secure what they are or what they have. More of the same to make sure they don't get weak in areas they're strong. And like I said, I really don't see the addition of A.J. Brown doing much because they still have Hurts under center. So they just did a lot to stay the same. They didn't get drastically better. Then to the New York Football Giants, who, even though they're coming from the basement, might have done more actual improvement to their team than Philly or Dallas. Even if some of the players are just short-term stabilizers, they were so bad that most of their losses were additions by subtraction. Just getting rid of a lot of the bad players to bring in at least serviceable ones. But the biggest improvement or addition was bringing in Brian Daboll at the coach position. Great hire that could turn things around for him in a hurry. After that, they picked up Mark Lewinsky in free agency to upgrade their guard position with a solid player there. They also got a couple guys Daboll is familiar with in John Feliciano and Jamil Douglas that aren't great, but can't be any worse than what they have. They at least give them something solid that the coach is already familiar with. And they also got a day 2 and a day 3 interior offensive lineman in the draft. But most importantly, they were able to add Evan Neal in the first to give them a nice set of bookends with Andrew Thomas at the offensive tackle positions. They might have the best on paper, bookend of tackles in the NFL. Like, these are both guys that were projected to be top 5 in the draft in their positions, locking down either side of the offensive line. So they should have the strongest offensive line Daniel Jones has ever had in front of him. And a chance to finally utilize all the weapons they've amassed for him. Galladay, Slayton, Shepard, Tony, if, they work things out with him, and now Wan'Dale Robinson. While they've made a downgrade at tight end, letting Ingram go and signing Ricky Seals-Jones, who I thought was a major problem for us, they have shifty wide receivers that can create after the catch with Tony and Robinson to more than make up for, the lack of production they're going to get out of tight end. So I think they could take a huge step forward offensively. I think, Daniel Jones does have talent. He just has had no protection. But New York just released their best cornerback in James Bradbury, which is a huge blow to their secondary. But it's a secondary that has some decent developmental guys entering their second or third year. And they could get a big boost, from the pass rush they could get from Kayvon Thibodeau. They got to add Kayvon Thibodeau, one of the best pass rushers in the draft. Somebody that was perceived as a possible first overall before Aiden Hutchinson had the season he did and the crazy testing that got the Georgia guy taken first overall, or the spite of that general manager against the Michigan coach. But so along with Thibodeau, they also got solid additions at linebacker with Darian Beaver and Micah McFadden late in the draft. They got a great athletic safety with Dane Belton from Iowa. I think he could be a solid contributor. Honestly, with Daboll and the additions they've made, I think the Giants could put it all together and have a shocking rise to follow us to the top, with them securing that second spot in the division. It might sound crazy, but coaching really matters. And I think they've got the best coach behind us in the division. And the Giants team was already packed with offensive weapons and a quarterback in Daniel Jones that has talent and dual threat ability. He just never had any protection. Like, their line was awful. I think he's now almost guaranteed at least average play from his offensive line. And that's going to let him use those weapons. And I think they're going to be a real problem. The defense is going to be solid enough with Thibodeau, Ojulari, Leonard Williams, causing pressure, and those, secondary guys that could take a step up. But I really think Daniel Jones is going to easily outshine Jalen Hurts this year. And, if his offensive line steps up, he could be. Yeah, it's a better improvement. That offensive line stepping up helps them improve at the most important position, quarterback. That offensive line being better makes their quarterback better. And that's the biggest impact you can make. Finally, the best for last, us, the Washington Commanders. We already had one of the most talented rosters in the NFC, honestly. We were just crushed by injuries, illness, and hampered by a lot of newness. In this offseason, we lost two beloved rotational pieces from our defensive line, but that was a group that underperformed last year, so we shed Ioannidis and Settle. But we still have the most talent-packed defensive line in the league, even with them leaving. And then we finally got Sheriff off the books, who might have given us all-pro play at times, but he never gave us a full season, it seemed like. With him, Eric Flowers was another great player we let go because he was a little pricey. We lost great return man and solid wide receiver in a pinch, DeAndre Carter. And we also lost Adam Humphries. That was signed to give Fitz some, something familiar last year. But 30 seconds into the season, Humphries just kind of became a mentor for Dax Milne because he didn't need to be anything for Fitz because Fitz was out. So our most important losses were actually conscious decisions. Like, we decided to let these defensive interior guys and interior offensive linemen go. But from the draft, the D-line gets a buff with Phil Mathis, who gives us something we were missing in the rotation, a true nose tackle, who should be able to boost the play of the line around him, along with the linebackers behind him, who I think will see a step forward from our first rounder from last year, Jamin Davis, with him moving to will linebacker and then having a guy like Mathis in front of him that's going to keep him clean and able to move around and make plays. We also added an upgrade at free safety, or maybe nickel, depending on where he ends up, with Percy Butler, who at the bare minimum will increase the makeup speed in our secondary and keep us from getting burnt like we got several times last year. William Jackson III started to get the hang of this defense towards the end of the year. That should continue into this year. Ben St-Juste showed promise when he was healthy. Hopefully he can stay healthy. I think this defense takes a big jump forward with the minor tweaks and additions. But most importantly, we got a massive upgrade at the most important and impactful position you can improve, quarterback. Carson Wentz is the upgrade at the position that upgrades all other positions. A good quarterback elevates every player on the offense, and Carson has had to elevate some suspect offensive players in his career. to Jalen Rager's. He just hasn't had much to work with. Outside of the offense, a good quarterback that keeps drives going and scores points elevates the defense too. Moving the ball and the chains and keeping drives going keeps the defense on the sideline and fresh. Scoring lets our pass rushers pin their ears back and get after the opposing quarterback that's trying to play catch up. A good quarterback makes the whole team so much better. We also added to an already talented wide receiver group of, Terry, Curtis, Diami, Cam, and Dax with Jahan Dotson. We added Jahan Dotson that, they're all going to receive that massive boost from Carson, just like Carson's going to receive that massive boost from them. I honestly think he's going to be the best he's ever been here. Better than his MVP type seasons. He just has a tremendously better situation than he's ever had here. We've built the depth and quality of our offensive line back up. And with John Matsko, I think this group will be even better than our 6th overall group was last year. I mean, Trey Turner and Andrew Norwell that we brought in to replace Sheriff and Flowers are Ron Rivera and Matsko guys that have been all pro players and Pro Bowlers with them before. Going to boost that offensive line for Wentz. And every single wide receiver on this roster is as good or better than any wide receiver 2 that Wentz has had in his career. All the way down to 5th option Dax Milne. He's better than any number 2 that Wentz has ever had. Then you got Terry, Curtis, Diami, and Dotson that all have the talent to be better than any wide receiver 1 that Wentz has ever had. If any one of our guys had been with Wentz at any point in his career, they would have been his top guy. Over Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar, Jalen Rager, even Pittman. Okay? These guys are all better than anything he's had to work with. So his first 4 options are better than his top options ever been. I think Logan Thomas is just as good or better than Dallas Goedert. He just needs a guy like Wentz and health to show that off. He's never had that. And people are massively sleeping on John Bates. Before we drafted him, before we had any designs on a trade for Wentz, John Bates was part of Zach Ertz's team protege program, where he mentors and coaches up tight ends he saw promising. Zach Ertz saw a lot of himself in John Bates because they're a lot alike. And athletically, while Ertz tested a tick faster, they're almost indistinguishable, really. Very much the same guy athletically, with Bates outshining him a bit with the agility and the explosion, which is going to make a big difference, coming out of the breaks. So fast forward to now, we got Zach Ertz 2.0 is matched up with the quarterback that helped the real Zach Ertz to 3 consecutive Pro Bowls and an 1,100-yard season. We got that. I think Bates can be the Zach Ertz 2.0. Then we add Cole Turner, possibly even one of these UDFA guys who have some real impressive tools. Some possible Sammis Reyes progression. This tight end position went to bountiful out of nowhere. And even if all that stuff I've said doesn't improve Carson's production over the performance he had last year in Indy, and we just get that 27 TDs, 7 interception baseline from Wentz, we still will be massively improved over the 20 touchdowns and 15 interceptions we got from Taylor. That's a 77-point swing that would have tallied up us winning 7 more games against the league's toughest schedule last year. You know, just that swing would have gave us a 14-3 record last year against that tough schedule with 11 points to spare. Now we're facing a far more favorable schedule, and like I've mentioned, Wentz is in an astronomically better situation than he was in Indy, where we should expect him to destroy his numbers from last year. Hell, he should destroy his numbers from 2017 to 2019. Last year, this team just got wrecked by injuries. It got wrecked by the COVID protocols. Now, the COVID protocols have been basically phased out, so that's one less obstacle to hamstring us. And along with that massive upgrade offensively, I think we've made, moves defensively, along with the natural year-to-year progression from a young group of players, growing more familiar with the defense, that will go a long way to us looking even better than we did down the stretch in Ron's first year. Just by the fact of us being far more consistent and looking that dominant against the best competition we faced. Unlike in 2020 where we just looked our best against scrubs. I think we're going to be able to step up and play our best football defensively against the best guys we play. I really think Carson Wentz slingshots this team to the top of the division. I know a lot of people are dismissive of Wentz's ability, but those people are completely ignoring any context surrounding Wentz's perceived shortcomings. Like, there's not much ground to stand on there unless you're talking about his injuries. That's the only real concern he has that's of any merit. I think he's exhibited elite play with far less support than it took to see that from Dak Prescott. And now he has a lot more than he's ever had before. That's why Washington will have the best team in the division in every front this season. Wentz is going to be the best quarterback with, him finally having the support to show it off with this offense. Him, along with that talent, we're going to end up with the best overall offense in the division. And quite possibly one of the best in the NFC. This defense is going to finally come together and be what it was supposed to be. And it's going to be the best defense in this division. And possibly one of the best in the whole NFC. Maybe in the NFL in general. I think this defense is going to step up and be what it's supposed to be. I think we have gone considerably under the radar because of the perception of Wentz, because how people reacted to our draft, because we've lacked any flashy free agency moves, but we made the most important improvement of any team in the division. And I think we're going to take a huge step forward in Ron's third year that will mirror his year 3 jump in Carolina. I think we're going to win the division at 13-4 and then make it to the NFC Championship game. That's what I think. I know that sounds crazy. That's how I see the season going. I think the Cowboys could fall to third in the division with what they've lost. And even more shockingly than that, even more shocking than our massive leap forward in the division, I think the Giants can make a big jump up to the second spot based solely on having Brian Daboll and getting the best out of Daniel Jones and his weapons. So I know it all sounds crazy, but I think this division ends up the Commanders, us up top, the Giants creaking out the number 2 spot, Cowboys, and then Philly all the way at the bottom, just because they're the worst off at the most important spot, the quarterback. This is all based solely on health. Like, if we stay healthy, and my feeling is we got crushed so bad last year that we're due a healthy year. So that's why I'm confident that this is where we could end up. So that's how I see it. I think we're going to rocket to the top, behind Carson Wentz and all these offensive weapons to begin this new era of Washington football, an era where this proud franchise can once again command respect. And what better way to kick off that new era than subscribing here to the first, the real, the Washington Command Center, so you can find your way back to some of the most opinionated and ice-cold calculated takes on all things Washington Commanders. And while you're at it, hit that like button. It's free to do, and it means a lot. And if y'all watch this long, I love y'all. Peace.